I'm Pam Marcucci. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon. Before turning it over to Heather Campbell, our education coordinator and the mastermind behind this summer's internship programs, I'd like to note a few things. This is the 10th consecutive, yes, even during COVID, summer that the JI has hosted an 8-week college internship program, and it's the largest program yet with 9 interns. To mark this occasion, we are hosting a reunion symposium tomorrow, bringing back some of the intern alumni, and I'm happy to see some of them in the audience right now. The symposium will highlight cutting-edge topics in medicine and will feature Dr. Thomas Oxley. Dr. Oxley is the founder and CEO of Synchron. Synchron is a company that makes minimally invasive brain-machine interface devices that allow people who can't talk because they're paralyzed due to ALS or spinal cord injury to use their thoughts to communicate with the outside world. That keynote speaker will be followed by a panel with Dr. Jason Davies, Dr. Irfan Khan, and Kelly Wofford, who's the Director for Health Equity in Erie County. So to date, 40, and actually now 50, thanks to these 9, interns have gone through the program, some of whom have joined the JI staff full-time. Many others have entered graduate or medical school programs, started their own companies, and gained employment at places like Apple, Boston Scientific, J&J, et cetera. We're happy to note that 14 have remained in Western New York, having seen that they don't need to go to Silicon Valley, Boston, or New York to find innovation. We have it right here. I wanted to thank the sponsors and businesses that helped make this internship, as well as our high school internship possible. Elizabeth and Chris Rosansky from the Maverick Foundation, Dr. Elliot Lazar, Dr. Ken Snyder, Sandra Small, Cafe 59, Sun Restaurant, The Lunchbox, and Wegmans. I can't emphasize how grateful we are for your contributions that allow us to run these and other impactful community engagements. To close, I wanted to note that we have a fundraising campaign going on now for our 2024 internship program, and you'll hear more about that later this afternoon. We're excited about the new opportunities we can provide for our programs with that funding. Thank you, and over to you, Heather.
Thank you, Pam. I'm Heather Campbell. I'm the education coordinator at the Jacobs Institute. So I ran our entire college program, and I cannot be more proud of these students. They have done a fabulous job over the last 8 weeks, and I'm super excited for them to share everything that they learned with you guys. So because I'm the education coordinator, before I start, I have to do a little bit of educating, so please forgive me. So first off, we are located in the Gates Vascular Institute. So the bottom 4 floors are the Gates Vascular Institute, the medical center. Above us is the UB's Clinical and Translational Research Center, and on the 5th floor, where you guys are right now, is the Jacobs Institute. So above us is research, below us is the medical center, and innovation is happening right where we are. So what do we do here at the Jacobs Institute? So we are a nonprofit medical device innovation center. And that means that we produce new medical devices for vascular disease. That's the main purpose of what we're doing here. So vascular disease is any condition that affects the vascular system. Now, there's a whole bunch of different types of vascular disease, but I'm just going to tell you about a couple to start off with. So we have cerebrovascular disease, which is any disease that affects the blood going into the brain, so blood flow or blood vessels. And this can include stroke, TIA, which is basically like a mini stroke, aneurysms. We also have atherosclerosis, which is a plaque that can build up in your arteries and cause thickening due to things like poor diet, lack of exercise, genetic factors. And these can end up causing deep vein thrombosis, heart attack, stroke. The last one I'm going to talk about are blood clots. This is basically just when your blood components stick together and can clog up a vein. And this can lead to, again, deep vein thrombosis, heart attack, and stroke. So how do we treat these things? One of the main things that we do are endovascular procedures. So these are minimally invasive procedures where we can take a small cut either in the wrist or in the groin and feed in a catheter. We can move these catheters basically anywhere in the body to treat these conditions. So I am so pleased to be announcing our interns for this year. We had 9 interns, and you can see that they worked in a variety of different places. They've been with us for the last 8 weeks, and we are so proud of the work that they've done. So today, our interns will be taking you on a virtual tour of the Jacobs Institute, and I hope that afterwards you will join us across the hall and we can give you a real tour of this place too. So to start us off, we're gonna have Brianna showing you the training lab.
Clicker. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Heather. Okay. Do you find it strange that many employees for medical device companies never get to see their products used or test them out themselves? This is a huge problem. How can a company sell a product without truly understanding what it does and knowing its limitations? Think about it like this. What if a real estate agent was trying to sell a house, but they've never actually been to the house before? They don't know if the pipes are broken, how truly beautiful the backyard may be, or about the crazy neighbors next door. All they know is what they just get from the description of the house, and they don't get the full picture. Believe it or not, this is similar to the production of medical devices. Engineers work endlessly to design and create medical devices, but very rarely do they get to see them used in the clinical environment. They don't know how the device might work really well for one procedure and not for another, or that the device might be perfect if it just did one extra thing. They don't get the full picture of their devices. Hi, my name is Brianna Willick, and this summer I was mentored by Tom and Kelly as the training intern. Over the course of the few weeks, I created materials to be used to help clinical immersion programs run more smoothly and to ensure that all the attendees get the most possible out of the programs. The JI hosts hundreds of clinical immersion programs every year. These can last from a few hours to a few days. During these, the attendees have the opportunities to speak with physicians, learn about various medical devices, and they can even shadow in the cath labs. These programs are incredible because not only can the device companies see their devices used in actual procedures, but they can perform their own endovascular procedures on 3D models, which occurs here in the training lab. During my second week of the JI, I sat in on a clinical immersion program, and I used everything that I learned over the course of the few days to help me with my major projects for this summer. My major projects were creating staff biographies and patient pathway flowcharts. Now let me talk a little bit about these. My first major project was creating a comprehensive list of staff biographies. There are over 45 Gates Vascular Institute, Jacobs Institute, and Kaleida employees that make clinical immersion programs possible. This comprehensive list is important to the JI because it can be provided to medical device companies to help inform them of the high-achieving staff of the JI. Now, in order to get information on us, companies don't have to go stalking us on LinkedIn. Although, if they really wanted to, I guess they still could, because I did provide the links for the profiles. My next major project was creating patient flowcharts. I created flowcharts for various cerebrovascular diseases and for diagnostic angiograms. The diseases that I covered were aneurysms, ischemic strokes, and arteriovenous malformations. Now let's take a deep dive into one of them. A stroke occurs when there's decreased blood flow to an area of the brain. This can happen because of a clot, which is an ischemic stroke, or because the brain is bleeding, which is a hemorrhagic stroke. Ischemic strokes are more common between the two. Now that you have a little bit of background, this is a flowchart that I made for ischemic stroke patients. It may seem like there's a lot of information up here, so let's break it down. The first step is the patient arriving at the hospital. They can either arrive by ambulance or get driven in by a family member or a friend. Once they arrive, the patient is immediately assessed by physicians. They get a CT scan of their brain, and then they are given TPA, which is a clot-busting medication, if appropriate. From there, the a physician must decide if they will perform a thrombectomy, which is a procedure to remove the clot. If so, then the procedure is performed, and then the patient receives the appropriate postoperative care. So it seems pretty straightforward, right? The patient has symptoms, so they come to the hospital, they get treated, and then they go home. But it's not that simple. There are many factors that can affect the treatment process, such as the patient's medical history, any comorbidities they may have, and even the location of the clot. So, as you can see, there are many variables that can affect the treatment process, and oftentimes medical device companies don't consider this. All they know is that patients go from point A, which is arriving at the hospital, to point Z, which is the physicians using the devices. But the medical device companies don't consider all the steps that happen in between. So these flowcharts are important because they provide enhanced clarity about the treatment process. In addition, they result in better clinical partners. The flowcharts can help explain the environments in which the devices are used and help medical device companies improve their devices in the future. Lastly, I had to take very complex issues with extremely complex treatment options and create a visual that's easy to understand. Did you know that after hearing information, you're only likely to retain about 10% of it 3 days later? But if you see something along with that, you're likely to retain 65% of the information. That is a huge difference. So not only can these flowcharts help device companies remember the information better, but they can also be referenced later on when the companies leave the JI. This summer, I helped the JI by creating materials to be used for clinical immersion programs, but the JI also tremendously helped me. From shadowing in the operating room and cath labs to meeting one-on-one with neurosurgeons, I was able to get incomparable life experiences from being here. And everything that I learned will help me in my future schooling and career as a physician assistant. By spending a summer here, I was able to get life experiences that medical students over 4 years older than me have not yet had, which is, I can't even begin to explain how amazing that is. By spending a summer at the JI, I was able to get a more full picture of cerebrovascular disease treatment, and I can help others to get the full picture as well. And this will conclude our time here in the training lab, and now I will pass it off to Ben, who will talk about the engineering and program management.
Thank you, Brianna. My name is Ben Michalowski, and over the last 8 weeks, I have had the pleasure to be the first program management intern. So before getting into my actual project, I first wanted to talk about what a program manager actually does. So a program manager is somebody who handles the relationships with key stakeholders or externally facing customers, while also handling communication within the organization. They help with planning and strategy with the certain projects that they are employed with, and they also help with day-to-day problem solving, happening all around the organization every single day. So now that you guys know a little bit about program management, let's get into what my project was. So coming in on the first day, this was my project description. Establish an optimized program management workflow that holistically improves business process efficiencies. Now I know what you're thinking, this might be a little bit broad, and I thought the same thing too, but this also made me really excited as I knew that I would be able to make an impact at the JI during my time in the internship. So moving on, during my first week, I was trying to absorb as much knowledge as I can, and a common sentiment was relayed to me very often, which was the plane was being built while they fly it. Now you can see many grins around the room as many JI employees also agree with this sentiment in the moment, but what does it really mean? This means that the JI is growing and innovating at such a high rate that it becomes challenging but nevertheless important to constantly update the standards and procedures used to keep the plane even flying. Knowing this fact, this made me even more excited to get my hands dirty and begin my own project myself. So I came up with 3 things that I really wanted to accomplish over the 8 weeks. The first was to understand the current state of new business workflow. Moving on, I wanted to implement new strategies that were able to enhance employee standardization. while finally uncovering new metrics for the program managers to be able to use for their future business decision making. So I'd like to start with understanding the current new business workflow. So if you look on my left and my right, you can see a process flow diagram that I created pretty early on in my journey. But I wanted to turn your focus to one specific section of this. This is where the program manager decides whether or not they're going to accept or deny a project. Now, in this key area, there are 3 things that I was able to note very early on in my internship. This was a very dynamic and fast-paced part of the program management workflow. What does that mean? This means that they're creating many steps and doing many things just to get everything ready to get the project off the ground. More importantly, program managers expressed high redundancy, meaning that in certain areas they were doing things over and over again where they felt that they could reduce the amount that they needed to do so. While in addition, there was low standardization, meaning that some employees, and more specifically program managers, felt that they needed a more reliable way to perform these processes, each the same. So now I'd like to dive into the 3 files that I really worked with during my internship, the first being the engineering quote file. This was basically how the program managers were able to build their budget, but also quote the customer out when they're getting ready to start a new project. Next, they utilized the rate sheet, which is an aggregation of all billable rates and margins used by the JI, including upstairs with all the tools and technology that is graciously made of use to us through them, and also downstairs with the brilliant physicians and also the tools and technology which we are graciously able to collaborate with. Finally, where I spent most of my time was with the financial tracker, which was a tool that the program managers were using to both keep into account where they were spending money as well as when they were spending their money. So, more specifically, keeping into account their monthly invoicing as well as how they were accruing their different expenses throughout their project. So, after reviewing these 3 files in my internship, I asked myself, how can we make this thing better? And after further discussion, we came up with a new financial tracker Lite. Now, what would this financial tracker Lite do? This would allow us to integrate the rate sheet, the EQF, and the financial tracker all into one tool that would be able to be more centrally located for the program managers to take less time bouncing back and forth from file to file. At the same time, this was intended for shorter duration projects, so while the old financial tracker was huge and could account for multiple years, we wanted to streamline that to just a couple months snapshot for those shorter projects, but still very important. Well, finally, we wanted to investigate how we could enhance the capabilities but decrease the amount of total manual input that the program managers were inputting onto this file. So I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell now, starting with the decreased manual input. If I could turn your attention to the top video that's going to play now, we can see that after the program managers import, this red circle will show that they are still manually typing in the base rate as well as the margin, which is very ineffective when they have to do this over and over again iteratively. With the new financial tracker, we'll see another import, but now at the red circle, we'll see those appear automatically. So this has proved to us that we can decrease the total amount of manual input, but also increase the amount of total automation. Digging a little bit deeper, these videos were exactly 7 seconds apart. Taking a real-world project, there were 240 entries just on that tab, so just this alone is saving the program managers 30 minutes, giving them time back in their day to focus on that problem solving and communication that's really important throughout the organization. Next, I'd like to talk about the notion of integrating the rate sheet to the financial tracker. Originally, as well as seeing a continuance of the old financial tracker having a laborious amount of manual input, we also see that at the top red circle that rate is indeed going to be another manual input. Not very efficient for the program managers. Moving on to the next video, with the new financial tracker Lite, not only are we continuing to decrease manual input by adding automation through drag and drop, but once we get over to the JI rate, as I entered myself into a consultant, that rate was automatically pulled from the rate sheet, which was able to prove that we are able to integrate all 3 of these files together. Finally, I wanted to increase the capabilities of the financial tracker itself. One way I did this was I created a tab that allowed the program managers to get a snapshot view month by month of, again, where they were spending their money and at what time they were spending their money. So giving them a tool to be able to more quickly get this snapshot view and send it cross-functionally to anybody who may need it, such as finance. So just kind of hacking through that little demonstration. On the integration front, the original financial tracker had no integration. Program managers were bouncing from rate sheet to financial tracker to EQF in order to aggregate all this information. Now, these are all integrated together. Manual input, there was a lot, as you could see, manual input on the original files. Now we have significantly decreased the amount of manual input, but also bolstered the amount of automation that is used in these files. Finally, from a simplicity standpoint, we see the old financial tracker needed significant training. As a new program manager, needed a lot of uptake to be able to even get this file running and really be able to use it correctly. Now, we hope that this new Financial Tracker Lite will enable a quicker uptake time and less training time needed for the program manager to be able to get their projects up and running and focus on what's important. So speaking on some testimonials, what did the program managers think about this, most importantly? Well, one spoke that this harmonizes the view to end users cross-functionally, like finance. Another stated that this gives them the ability to have more refined discussions. What could the future state of program management look like? And finally, another stated that this is a more friendly and user-efficient model and allows them to be able to fly the plane instead of having to build the plane and fly it at the same time. So finally, before I wrap up, I just wanted to talk about the things that I learned throughout this internship. First and foremost, throughout my presentation, I have harped on communication and the communication that I have witnessed and learned from all of my mentors, program managers. And this really taught me the importance of being able to communicate cross-functionally, but to be able to relay a message in a streamlined and efficient manner. From an adaptability point, it was not hard to tell that the program managers were having a new day every day. And this was really cool to see and very inspiring for me, as it allowed me to really take a deep dive on what a program manager is and everything they really do on a day-to-day basis. And finally, problem solving. As a traditional biomedical engineer, the opportunity to be able to get my hands dirty as a program manager and problem solve every day really made me inspired to, again, take a deeper look into that career, as I do love problem solving, and problem solving is something that is very vital to a program manager's day-to-day life. So with that, I would like to keep us going along our JI journey and introduce Madison, who is going to speak to us about our Idea to Reality Center. Thank you.
So hi, I'm Madison DeZucco, and I was an engineering intern in the I2R department this summer. So you're probably wondering, what is the I2R? And to be honest, this is a very complicated process, and I've been here 8 weeks, and I'm still learning of the full capabilities that this program has. But I'm going to keep it as simple as possible. So I2R stands for Idea to Reality. So we will take your idea for a medical device and through all stages of design, testing, and even clinical trials. So this process not only includes engineers, but researchers, physicians, and clinical experts. So before I begin, I just want to highlight the relevant medical background as well as the 3D models used here at the JI. I'm going to explain my project, starting with the previous design and incorporating or showing how my design improves the function and efficiency. I will lastly show a video of the 3D anatomical model simulating the real-life scenario. So who here has heard of a blood clot? Okay, good. So the medical term for a blood clot is thrombus. So when performing certain vascular procedures like those performed downstairs at the Gates Vascular Institute, catheters are inserted into the blood vessels. There's a risk of these blood clots breaking off and emboli forming in the bloodstream. These emboli can travel downstream and block smaller blood vessels. This is something we obviously do not want to happen, as it can cause a heart attack or stroke. So here at the JI, we test new technology to help remove these emboli from the bloodstream. So right here we have a 3D printed anatomical model of an aortic arch, which is part of the heart that pumps blood to the brain and the upper and lower extremities. We attach a pulsatile flow pump to this 3D model, which simulates blood flow just as it is pumped through the body. We have filters on the downstream ends to help catch particles. So when we are testing a device, we want the efficiency to be 100%. So we want the no particles to be left in these devices, or in the filters. So this was my project, was to redesign these filters. So I just want to reiterate that my project was not a medical device to be used by physicians, but it was an attachment to the medical device used to test the efficiency. So there were 5 filters on the model, 4 of which being 1 inch in diameter and 1 being 2 inches in diameter. The engineers were using this device and saw some areas for improvement. Like the particles were trapped on the interior side of the filter, which made it very difficult to clean. They also thought that it had a rather unprofessional appearance. So after many prototypes and designs, this was my new filter model. So as you can see, the particles are now trapped on the exterior side of the filter. I will now pass around some of my models, both the previous and new model, and highlight the key changes that I made. So the first change that I made was how it attached to the anatomical model. So as you can see here, the original design had the same barbed ends, which if the operator was not paying attention, they could easily insert this backwards into the 3D model. So in order to change this, I added different hose ends to the filter model. So now it is basically impossible to put this filter in backwards. I also added an arrow to indicate the direction of flow, just reinforcing this direction to be placed in the 3D model. So next, when you're normally working with this model, your hands are wet and possibly covered in soap. This can make it very difficult to do almost anything. So as you can see in the first video, the original design was very difficult to take apart. Much force was required. So in the new model, a simple change by adding ergonomic features makes it much easier to take apart. This reduces the time and frustration among the operator. So another area for improvement was the housing. So the original housing had a poor fit and looked rather unprofessional. So the new design basically had the housing incorporated into it. As you can see, it's made out of the same material as the rest of the components, just giving it a more overall professional look. So the last change involved how it was cleaned. So this was the biggest area of improvement. So as you can see, the original design had the particles trapped on the back side of this filter. You essentially had to spray water in all sorts of directions, just hoping the particles would be removed. This was not very time efficient at all for our busy engineers. Now, the particles are trapped on the outside of the filter. So a simple rinse of water will remove any debris. So now I'm just going to show you a short video demonstration of a 3D anatomical model. So as water is being pumped, just as blood is pumped through the body, the particles are injected into the model. The particles travel upward through the 3 branches and downward through the descending aorta. My filter design catches these particles used to validate medical devices. So by improving the filter housing design, next generation vascular devices are more accurately tested here at the JI, simulating real-life scenarios where emboli are present in the bloodstream. So with that, we are going to continue our tour onto the 3D model lab, where James is going to describe the material used in our vascular 3D models.
Thank you, Madison. Hi, my name is James. I was an engineering intern here at Jacobs Institute, and I'll be taking you through our 3D model lab, but more specifically, my project on Agilis characterization, which basically means we want to find out the physical features, properties of our material through testing and quantitative reasoning. So, to start off, our current vascular models are some of the best in the world. They are clinically relevant, and this is our focus point here at JI. They're really accurate for our device testing and pre-surgical planning. But I focused on the product life cycle, and using Agilis as our primary material, we want to investigate the vessel properties to improve our models and our longevity. But when we sell our models to our customers, we tell them that they're intended for single test sessions because they can't withstand more than one trial. but our customers will keep and reuse models. So a question that arises is, how does Agilus change over the course of a single session or from session to session? So the first material I'm going to talk to you guys about is Agilus. Agilus is a photopolymer which solidifies under light. So while our printer is running, it'll lay out a sheet of liquid Agilus, and right after that, a UV light passes through, which cures and hardens it. And this is great for our vascular models because Agilus is really stretchy, it's rubber-like, and really good with tear resistance. And by itself has a Shore value of A30. So if we look here at this Shore hardness scale, it goes from either end, extra soft to extra hard. We have, for example, Shore A. Rubber bands have a Shore value of A20, which is soft, and a pencil eraser has a Shore value of around A55, which is medium soft, medium hard, and we fit right in between there. Another material that our printer uses is VeroClear. VeroClear is a transparent material that simulates acrylic. It can be an alternative to glass and is really ideal for concept modeling and design verification. With this project, we decided that we could blend VeroClear with Agilus to improve some of its transparency, and to create a more rigid model while keeping or improving its transparency. And so this equation right here, Agilus plus VeroClear equals an increase in Shore value, A40 and A50. So here's my model that I created on various softwares. I have the model right here, if you can pass it around. So we have 3 different sized tubes with different thicknesses and different diameters. Our first section A represents our aortic vessels. We then have section B, which is our mid-sized vessels, which represent our carotid arteries. And then we have our smaller vessels, which represent our intracranial vessels in the brain. And you can see here at the top, these are barbs we put on the end of each tube for flow testing with water and to dry our models. And we pass air through the tubes and water. We also have this support that goes around the model, which is made out of Vero White, which is has the same properties as VeroClear, it's just a different color, but it keeps it all together. So now I'm going to be talking to you guys about the product cycle testing, and I created a testing matrix to try and replicate the use of our model over time. So first we have saturation. So we put this model that I passed around underwater for about 2 hours, and we set it to about 37 degrees Celsius to represent the temperature in our body. We then send it over to the drying rack where we do our transparency testing. So when this model is saturated, Agilus reacts with the water and the model becomes really cloudy and opaque. And we're unable to see inside the vessel unless you are using a C-arm with fluoroscopy. We then go to our lubricity test, and this tests really how slippery the inside of our model is, and this helps our devices pass through easily. So if there was some friction inside the vessel, potentially your device that you're testing or your catheter could get stuck and could cause delays in your simulation. And then we ask this question, how, over time, does our model lose its slipperiness? Lastly, we have tensile testing to know at what point our model will break or lose shape. And so this was the first cycle of our testing, and we repeated this 3 times to mimic session-to-session testing. Not only did I create a testing matrix, but I learned how to use this equipment to allow me to do the testing. So first we have our transparency testing. Here's a quick time lapse of our model drying with the tubes. We put some sheaths, colored sheaths in each tube to see when our model returned back to normal. And we saw that the timing was the same across the board and did not depend on the cycle it was on or the Shore value. And this is potentially because the VeroClear is not significant enough in the blend to make a change. And so restored at around 1 hour and 45 minutes. Then we have our lubricity testing. Here we have 2 cycles, test cycle 0, which happened before our testing, and then test cycle 3, which happened after 3 cycles of saturation. And so it's measured by the pull force needed to lift the material in between these 2 nylon rollers that are tight. And so the easier the material passes through those rollers, the more slippery it is, and vice versa. So if we focus here on our A30, it's here in gray. As expected, our pull force gradually increases, and the starting pull force is around between 40 and 50 grams. After 3 cycles, the average starting pull force increased from 40 to around 60 to 62, and then gradually increased to around 80 or 90. And so this shows that after multiple uses, lubricity does wear off in our models. Then here we have our tensile testing, and to help you understand this graph, as the slope increases, this is how our material is getting stretchier and stretchier, and then that drop-off at the end shows that our material broke and went through catastrophic failure. And so as expected, A30 can be stretched more compared to our rigid materials like A40 and A50. And A30 is used in our models today, and they're our most accurate models. But A40 and A50, because they have more rigid models, this is interesting because we can give the option for customers if they want a more compliant model or a longer lasting model. So, 3 big takeaways. During our model drying testing, saturation is basically equivalent for each shore value. For our lubricity, we realized there was an increase in friction after multiple uses. And lastly, for our tensile testing, A30 represents more stretchy vessels, while our A40 and A50 represent more rigid vessels. And so, to continue along on our JI journey, I'm going to pass it on to Tyler, who is going to take us through our 3D printing lab. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone. I'm Tyler Hodge, and I was an engineering intern this summer. And I'll be taking you through the 3D printing lab, where our anatomical models are created. Now, as James mentioned during his presentation, the main models that we create here are vascular models. But as the JI collaborates and works with additional medical device companies, there has developed a growing need to develop neurosurgical models, which encapsulate features surrounding the vessels. With that in mind, my project this summer was to build an anatomical neurosurgical model with 4 main capabilities. The first capability is to have a feel-like model that simulates the feel of a regular soft tissue and bone. We also wanted to introduce visualization into the vascular network as the blood vessels weave throughout the brain. We also wanted to make it interactive. We didn't want just a model just to sit there that you can look at and touch for a few seconds. We wanted to actually use it for training applications. We also wanted these interactions to be reproducible. So before I got to building my skull and brain model, I first needed to determine which materials I needed to select that we could 3D print to resemble these features of interest. And these features were the skull, the brain, soft and hard tumors, and blood clots. Now, the materials available to us were provided by Stratasys Digital Anatomy, and they also had presets in which they had claimed resemblance to some of these features, such as blood clots and tumors. But within our space, these presets are largely undefined, and it was my goal to define these presets as well as determine if there are some other custom blends that can be created to be clinically relevant to these features. So I first went about designing some samples to use with different material blends. You can see the first one being for clots. You can see cylindrical in nature, just like blood vessels at varying sizes. Next, I have my bone sample, which is to simulate the flat bones of the skull. And then the next one for brain and tumors, I just did a volumetric cube. Now with these, I just loaded up different materials and presets and blends into the printer, printed it, and then came up with these samples that I'll be passing around. Just as a word of caution, be careful with the samples. They are kind of delicate, especially within the cartridges, and they can be kind of sticky, so I apologize. So as you can see, the samples turned out pretty much what their shapes were, but not all of them. You can see here the brain sample on one of them actually turned out to be, it actually deformed a bunch because it couldn't support its own weight. Other models were more granular in nature and actually fell apart during the cleaning process. Now, to test these models and to characterize them, we actually used qualitative analysis to see if we could simulate the tactile feel. And since I've never actually touched a brain, I had to consult with Dr. Siddiqui, who identified 4 materials that actually did have some clinical relevance. And these were the brain 3, bone 1 and 2, and soft tumor 6 models. We also learned a great deal about print sensitivity and how we design our models for getting ready to print. A lot of considerations with how we design our geometries and thicknesses and how it impacts the mechanical and physical properties. For future testing in this space, we want to start doing quantitative data and measurements, just like what James did with the Agilis, in order to validate our findings and material selection and compare them to what is known and written in literature. So now that I had a good idea of what materials I wanted to use, it was time to start making my neurosurgical model, which started with feature segmentation. For those of you who aren't familiar, segmentation is taking 2D slices from MR or CT, isolating the region of interest, and then creating a 3D model, which is shown in the top left. From there, I smoothed and aligned my various features of interest, and then in order to create a print-friendly model. Next, I separated into halves my brain and skull, just so the piece can be dynamic and can be modular in its use. And then I selected my materials and loaded them onto the print bed, which is shown there. Now lastly, after cleaning, after about 2.5 days, our final model was ready and cleaned and looking all nice. And here we have on the left, you can see our transparent left-sided brain, which is showing you the visualization of the vessels kind of weaving through the brain. And our right side is that feel like. Now, I don't have the model in front of me now, but if you go to the reception afterwards, you can definitely take a look and feel it. So one of the unique features of this is actually via the cartridges and how they allow for interaction with our device. So you can see the cartridges have 2 capabilities right now for tumor resection and aneurysm clipping. And these cartridges encapsulate materials such as a soft tumor and hard tumor within them, and as well as an aneurysm. So you can actually see I go in here with a surgical instrument and do a mock tumor resection where I'm removing a tumor from the cartridge. And once this is done, we can then take out the cartridge and print out a new one with a different aneurysm or tumor, and then replace it easily without having to go through the whole process of creating the whole model, thereby saving time and money. There's a lot of opportunity for improving this area and making these models interactive for training. And this can be seen in how we define our tumors and where we place them inside the skull, maybe change the physical properties or the shape and size. We can also introduce other disease states, such as hemorrhaging from a stroke. This is an animation of the exploded view of my model. You can see all the moving pieces here. There are about 40 pieces in total in the device, or the model. Here you can see the cartridges coming out of the brain in their glory. And then as you can see all the different colors of the different items and materials, and each of those colors represents a different material that was meticulously selected in order to encapsulate the feel and look of the model. So to sum up, there are some ways that we can design or optimize this design, and this can first be seen in how we segment our features. So one of the largest features of the design is the brain. We can further segment this into gray versus white matter. We can also do the brainstem and as it goes into the spinal cord, because those are separating by physical properties. Similar to our vascular models, we can also introduce flow studies where we can test in a similar vein to what we do with the vascular models. Lastly, as I mentioned earlier, we can continue with quantitatively testing our models or our material selection just to get that validation in which ones we choose. And to sum things up, so the higher capabilities and the more we improve a model such as this, we can create an environment that allows for improved design, testing, and development of medical devices. So how do we ensure during the print process that our standard, or our device is up to standard? Well, that brings us to the next step, which is the quality offices with Mia.
Hi, my name is Mia Bergio, and I had the opportunity to work at the Office of Quality Services this past summer at the Jacobs Institute. As Tyler previously mentioned, he created an anatomical model for the skull and the brain. Models are constantly being created here at the Jacobs Institute for physicians to use. They use these models to test surgical procedures, to test medical device implementation, and to make sure that their plan is correct. Now, these models have to comply to certain quality and regulatory standards in order to ensure that their execution and their development aligns with their intended usage. That's where the Office of Quality Services comes in. The Office of Quality Services has both a quality policy and a quality scope. Our quality policy is centered around the notion that the Jacobs Institute is determined and committed to provide top-tier quality models and devices to all of our customers as well as internally. Our quality scope establishes our boundaries that we focus primarily on vascular and neurological models and devices. In order to understand the Office of Quality Services, it's important to understand what a quality management system does as a whole. A quality management system can be implemented by any organization. A quality management system establishes procedures, lays out change policies, responsibility, personnel, as well as different management practices in order to ensure that the mission and vision of an organization are correctly executed through their implementation. Now, as I begin talking about my project for this summer, I focused on quality targeted enhancements. Particularly, I had to streamline our quality management system in order to prepare for the production of medical devices here at the Jacobs Institute through its I2R, as Madison previously mentioned. This two-tiered system that I helped implement is based on risk, indicating that for models and devices with higher risk that could potentially be used in patients, more quality regulation and oversight is necessary. This two-tiered system was divided into research and design models as well as level 3 models, which will eventually scope to include medical devices. Research and design models include both level 1 models and level 2 models. Level 1 models include internal research and feasibility models, and these models, feasibility models, are always being changed in order to ensure that their development matches their intended use. Since change is necessary, it can become arduous and burdensome to constantly update documents and have different procedures written for each thing, especially if these models have a low risk associated with them. Level 2 models include some customer-facing feasibility models as well as JI feasibility stock. And level 3 models are fully qualified models that are subject to every quality and regulatory standards here at the JI. These models will eventually include medical devices as the JI hopes to produce these devices in the future. These were the key resources that I utilized when trying to understand and implement my project that I'm going to walk you through now. To begin, I really had to understand the need for medical device quality. Did you know that the medical device industry grows at a compound annual growth rate of 5% per year, indicating that the need to innovate in this realm is huge? Additionally, medical devices have accounted for a 5-year increase in average patient life expectancy, emphasizing the notion that medical devices are especially useful in providing overall quality of health for all individuals. Lastly, medical device quality, especially in the cardiovascular realm, is necessary, as 42% of all adverse events caused by medical device malfunctions, where adverse events can be disability, death, or hospitalization, were caused by cardiovascular medical devices, which emphasizes the notion that the need to have quality models in this realm is huge. As you strip medical devices to their core, what remains is a top-tier quality system that prioritizes their patient and overall health. I then had the opportunity to directly communicate with new suppliers, where I understood the relationship between the Jacobs Institute and its many cooperative organizations. I had the opportunity to work with VDX Pathologies, which provide preclinical services here at the JI, but I did realize the dual-faceted nature associated with these suppliers. On one hand, as the Jacobs Institute is committed to providing top-tier quality models to its customers, We need top-tier resources and materials and services in order to make these. On the other hand, as the Jacobs Institute has a globally renowned, reputable organization, other suppliers want to work with us and innovate with us in this realm. I then modified the complaint process to reflect different categories of risk. I'm just going to take you through the complaint process briefly so you understand one quality procedure here at the JI. We begin with an investigation where we determine what models were complained about as well as the medium by which the complaint was received. During the root cause analysis, we determined why the device malfunctioned and if there was an issue in production or post-production or shipping. After this, we assign a risk to these complaints. Now, there's not a lot of complaints at the JI, but of the complaints, they were all relatively low risk, but we just want to make sure that no operators or processors are harmed in the process. After this, we have to respond to the customer because the customer is our priority, and we need to make sure that their needs are being met and they are being heard. Then we can close the complaint, but this process really allowed me to see the real need for a quality management system in this regard. There's a specific procedure in place, and it's followed through in a very standardized way to ensure that the organization runs efficiently. I then looked at the quality standard by which the JI complies. So the JI complies to ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, 13485-2016 version. Now I read it, and it's a 50-page document. I read it once, and then I had to read it again because I didn't understand anything first time. Then I read a similar version that the FDA kind of produced that's a national standard, it's not an international standard. And what I found was that the ISO framework is really a template for how an organization should run if it wishes to produce medical devices, this particular version. Part of my project was working with Dr. Snyder, who was the vice president of physician quality at Kaleida, in addition to many other things. And he and I really discussed the quality standards in a really thorough way. But what I ended up doing was creating a proposal that would ultimately seek to interpret this quality standard for lay people like myself who weren't top quality experts. And it would use the Jacobs Institute as a pillar organization, an example of how a quality management system can be implemented to produce medical devices. So I'm now going to get into the actual execution of my project and some takeaways that I learned. I first revised the procedures necessary to begin the implementation process for the two-tiered system here at the JI. In addition, I have some intangible takeaways as well. I really had great increased communication skills. From talking to physicians, to engineers, to mentors and peers, I had the ability to connect with many individuals daily, and I'm forever grateful for all the advice I've gotten during my time at the JI. Additionally, I remember coming home one day and telling my mom that I talked to more neurosurgeons today than I did my own friends, so it's a really crazy experience here. I also have a refined thought process after leaving the JI. Carlos, who's my mentor, told me on day one that my experience as an organic chemistry TA would help me in this role, and I had no idea how. After 8 weeks, I can safely say that I understand the correlation of following a procedure thoroughly, executing it, and using it to make a change. Lastly, in my future endeavors here, I have learned that in my career, I hope to pursue a medical role and have a job in the medical industry, but being able to shadow in the operating room in the morning and then at lunch, watching live streams of catheterization procedures to in the afternoon, touring the helipad at Buff General. I've had so many amazing experiences here that I do not take for granted, and I'm forever grateful to the Jacobs Institute for providing those. So with that being said, I thank you for your time, and I'm going to pass it over to Erin, who's going to give you a tour of the boardroom as she talks about how these devices come to market through the FDA.
Hi, I'm Erin O'Neill, and this summer I worked in the Office of Regulatory Services. Oftentimes, we utilize the boardroom as a way for collaboration to occur between clients who are looking to submit to the FDA and the Jacobs Institute. Now, you may be wondering, what role does the Office of Regulatory Services play here at the Jacobs Institute? I like to explain it as a stepping stone between device development and research and the FDA, or the Food and Drug Administration. As Madison mentioned earlier, the JI plays a unique role in each step of the total product lifecycle. Devices move through discovery and ideation, invention and prototyping, preclinical and clinical trials, and off to the FDA for a submission review. After product launch, the device will be monitored for product performance as well as product development. So my role this summer was to help clients looking to submit to the FDA get their products out to their patients. In order to get a medical device out to the patients, we first need to define what a medical device is. A medical device is defined as an instrument used to treat or diagnose a condition or intended to affect a function of the body. Here at the Jacobs Institute, we're a vascular institute, but we deal with both neurologic and vascular devices for treatment of heart disease and stroke. So after there's an idea for a medical device, there's a long pathway through the FDA in which the device must travel before it can get out to the patients. The first step, being an optional step, is a pre-submission. A pre-submission is where a submitter can receive feedback from the FDA before their final submission. Next are clinical studies, which are used to gather data in order to back up their information that they're giving to the FDA. Lastly, are formal marketing submissions. There's a couple different pathways you can take depending on the FDA's familiarity with the device. For example, a de novo submission is used when there's a new device that the FDA has never seen before, while a PMA, or a pre-market approval application, is used for a device that is of the highest risk, or a Class 3 device. So for my project this summer, I worked on a Q submission, a clinical study, and a 510K submission. So the first submission I worked on was a Q submission for a stroke thrombectomy device. A Q submission is where you can submit to the FDA and ask any questions that you have before your formal submission. As I said earlier, this is an optional step, but a lot of submitters take advantage of it as it is no cost to the submitter. This process for me included filling out a cover sheet, writing a device description, and an intended use for the device. This tool is a great option for submitters as you can compile all your information about your device as well as receive feedback from the FDA. The JI submits several Q submissions annually, and I'm excited to announce that earlier this week, my work on the Q submission for the stroke thrombectomy device was submitted to the FDA. Next are clinical studies, where a trial is done, a procedure is written, and a justification as to why the device is necessary is included. These are very similar to lab reports. Clinical studies are important to gather that data that you need to back up your device so the FDA can see that it really does work as it should and you're not just saying that. Here at the Jacobs Institute, we're involved in several clinical studies that happen right here in Buffalo. Next, I worked alongside the doctor behind the idea for a pre-surgical planning software in order to submit a 510K submission. A 510K submission is made to the FDA to demonstrate that the device is safe and effective. Now, this is different from a PMA, as a 510K references a predicate device or a previously approved device by the FDA. This makes the approval process from the FDA a lot simpler because the FDA is already aware of the device. A 510K is used when there's just a small change made to the device without changing the intended use. So for this process, I wrote up a device comparison, a device description, and a performance testing debrief. And the Jacobs Institute is also involved in many 510K submissions throughout the year. Following my interactions with the FDA, I created templates to make the future of the regulatory office simpler. These templates included pre-submissions, clinical investigation protocol and reports, investigational device exemption, 510Ks, and de novos. These templates make it so that clients can simply plug in their information about their device, and we at the JI can review them, reformat them, and submit them to the FDA. This task was assigned to me to make those interactions with clients a lot simpler. And as Mia mentioned earlier, we at the JI want to ensure quality in our work. So having a consistent template for formatting in order to submit to the FDA is extremely valuable. To wrap up, I wanted to mention a few of the things I learned while here at the Jacobs Institute. The first being that the FDA is comprised of humans and not machines. Building a connection with those people make the interactions with the FDA that much more enjoyable. Next, device development is not just about the data that we're receiving, but about those patients that the devices will eventually get to. So our patients are always our #1 priority. Lastly, some additional steps for my project would be submitting a 510K for the pre-surgical planning software, as well as an IDE for the stroke thrombectomy device that we submitted to the FDA. The last thing I learned was that no matter how many times you tell your family you don't want to be a doctor, they will never stop asking you. So our next stop on the tour is the Mentis with Marielle, where she will explain our education opportunities that we have here at the JI.
Thank you, Erin. So my name is Marielle Gottmaitan. I was the education intern for the summer. I will be taking you through Mentis. So what exactly is Mentis? Mentis is an endovascular surgical simulator here at the JI. It's used to educate students and clients that come through the JI on endovascular diseases. Why is education so important? Education is important because it creates exposure for students into different STEM careers. How does the JI do this? The JI does it through programs like the Brain Boot Camp, which I will talk about in a little bit, as well as the college internship, which you are all here to see. Thank you again for showing your love and support, as well as the high school internship. So what is the high school internship? The high school internship is a 2-week program run here just at the JI, and it's always over the summer. So students come in from all over the United States. This year, we had 20 students, which I was in charge of. I broke down the internship into 5 different parts: lectures, tours, shadowing, BME or biomedical engineering activities, as well as their final lecture presentations. The lectures all compose of guest speakers who came from different varieties of backgrounds. Some of them were doctors or nurses in different specialties, as well as researchers and our own JI staff. They spoke about cardiovascular diseases, treatments, devices, and preventative measures. They also came to talk about career exploration, their pathways into their careers as well. One of the lecturers that came in was a cardiovascular surgeon, Dr. Matthews, who talked about cardiovascular disease, as well as Dr. Moreland, who is a neurosurgeon, who talked about the first spinal surgery on a polar bear here at the Buffalo Zoo. Students also got to shadow down in the cath labs. So downstairs, just like Heather said, there are the cath labs, the catheter labs. The students got to observe endovascular surgeries like carotid artery stents. They also got to work with Mentis, as I've mentioned before, the surgical simulator. Students also got to go to a variety of different institutions. One of them was the Hopman Woodward Institution, a 2-minute walk down the street. They focused on protein crystallization, which was really cool because I didn't know that we did that here in Buffalo. They also got to go to M&T Bank to listen to a panel of engineers talk about STEM careers as well as technology's trajectory into the healthcare field. One of the BME activities that the students got to do, if you guys are familiar with the show Survivor, students got to separate into teams. They sent one of their team members to go and grab puzzle pieces in a relay race. Once they got all their puzzle pieces, they came back and worked on a puzzle together. This was to promote cardiovascular health through exercise for the students. They also got to work on a clogged artery device, where they made their own devices, and the role was to make their device take out the plaque in a clogged artery as well as collect the plaque, very similar to how Madison talked about how her device collected plaque or emboli to prevent clogs in arteries and more strokes. Students at the end of their presentations took what they learned from the internship over the 2-week time period and applied it to their 5-minute TED Talk presentations. All of these presentations were about topics such as cardiovascular diseases, their devices, treatments, and preventative measures. This was to promote leadership skills for the students. Traditionally, the program runs for 2 weeks. This is the first year that the Jacobs Institute is running it for an additional 5. 1 week is spent with us doing basic lab skills. The other 4 are spent upstairs in the CTRC doing research in real-time labs. So some of the basic skills that we taught the kids were measuring, where they learned pipetting skills and techniques. They also learned lab safety, sterile techniques, how to properly dispose of glassware. Students also learned microscopes, the difference between wet and dry slides, as well as how to use a microscope. And they also learned various different mixing methods like inverting, vortexing, and of course, lab equipment, such as a Bunsen burner or an autoclave, which if you guys don't know, it's essentially a really big oven in a lab, and it gets to super high temperatures, which is used to sterilize lab equipment. I did not know how to use an autoclave coming into this, so it was a lot of fun for the students to see me struggle to learn how to use an autoclave to show them. So it was a learning experience for everybody. The purpose of the lab skills was for the students to use them in their prior 4-week research labs. So one of the activities that they did using these techniques that they just learned was cell cultures. They used their sterile techniques to make their own yeast cultures to take home. They also did their pipetting techniques for gel electrophoresis, which is typically used in DNA fingerprinting. Additionally, kids also got to use their mixing skills that they just learned in DNA necklaces. So they extracted DNA from their cheek cells, used their mixing methods that they learned to get the precipitate of DNA and put it into a microcentrifuge to take home in a necklace. So another program that the Jacobs Institute runs is the Brain Boot Camps. I was in charge of running one of them. What a Brain Boot Camp is essentially the high school internship condensed into a day. The purpose for this and the goal for this is to further educate the community as well as eliminate barriers. So one of the reasons why the Brain Boot Camps run is because a lot of the students sometimes can't commit to the 2-week program. Maybe this is because they have prior commitments such as sports, school, or a family vacation. These Brain Boot Camps only run for 1 day. So they still get the same educational opportunities as the interns do, and that barrier is then eliminated. Another reason why we run the boot camps is because it does not run just for the summer. It's year-round. So if you can't come for the summer, you can come another day. And this creates a lot of flexibility for the students to come in during the year and get that education. In Western New York, we have the highest rate of cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular health education is super important. And so a lot of these barriers to these kids getting this kind of education are eliminated. One of the ways that we do this here at the JI is through transportation. So the JI provides bus and parking passes to the students so that they don't have to worry about how to get here. Some of these kids, a lot of them have parents who work day jobs, can't take them to the internship. So by providing these transportation accessibility passes is really vital for them coming to the JI to get their educations. In addition to this, we also provided them with healthy lunches. A lot of the lunches were provided by local businesses here in Buffalo. And a lot of similar programs that offer the same things as the JI does typically will charge kids between $60,000 to $3,000 just to participate. Here at the JI, it is entirely free for the students to participate. It's at no cost to them. In addition to this financial access barrier being eliminated, some of the students, by making this program 7 weeks, then became eligible to get income from the Mayor Summer Youth programs. So having all of these barriers be eliminated for these students creates a huge environment for them to get learning that is accessible, it is easy, it is fun. So of course, we had student satisfaction surveys to assess the viability and the success of our programs. Seeing the numbers here, a lot of the kids loved the lectures and the tours the most. Right after that is BME activities and then the career exploration from all of the different doctors and nurses and all of the JI staff from different backgrounds. So seeing all these numbers, as well as all of the testimonials from the students at the end of the program, was so inspiring to me. And one of my own personal goals coming into this internship was to not just be an education intern, but also to be an education intern, and not to just be an educational resource for these kids, but also to be a big sister to them. So I know that coming into an internship, especially in the STEM field, it can be super intimidating to learn new things and to be in a new environment. So by being a big sister and creating a safe environment for them to connect with somebody in the STEM field was super important to me. So similarly to how they learned from the internship and from me, I learned a lot from them. I learned from all of these student testimonials that it was me, I did this. I created an environment for these kids to learn, to have accessible learning, to have fun learning, to have easy learning, the same way that the JI has done for me as an education intern. So with that, I will hand you off to our next stop in our JI tour, which will be the donor wall with Maxana, who will talk to you more about the JI's local impact here in Buffalo.
Thank you, Marielle. Hello, my name is Maxana Grubb, and I am the Communications and Philanthropy intern here at the JI. And this summer, I was tasked with curating and strengthening our social media presence. You know, it's quite interesting how the JI is known so well globally, like in places such as South Korea or India, but we fly under the radar here in our own city. CEO Dr. Siddiqui often mentions this and highlights this, and the need to reinforce our local presence. So let's do a quick show of hands. Who here, at one point or another, thought that the Jacobs Institute was the Jacobs School of Medicine? I did too. But as you can see, we are a completely different entity. I'm here to clear up this misconception and strengthen our local presence by sharing our story through social media and cutting through that confusion. Why bother when we are known globally? Well, Buffalo is our home. It is where we were founded, and it is where our impact is most deeply felt. We wanted to increase local visibility and open doors for partnerships and philanthropic support, as well as collaborations from the community we seek to serve. Now, I'm going to take you through the steps that I took to make this idea a reality. Firstly, I'm going to explain our approval process for streamlining content onto our social media platforms, specifically in engineering and education area. Our old process was a bit cumbersome. It would go from our social media team to program managers to executive leadership. Except there was one problem. Executive leadership is typically down in the cath labs performing surgery. So it's understandable why a social media approval would be at the bottom of their list. So we revamped the process. Now the PMs go to the clients, who they have a direct relationship, and are able to get approval from them and gauge their needs, their concerns, and the message that they want to convey. This speeds the process up and eliminates unnecessary bottlenecking. One change I personally wanted to make to our Instagram and social media pages was implementing videos. I knew the power of Reels videos just because TikTok and Reels, I know my parents love Reels, but as the numbers speak for themselves, videos have proven to be an incredible and powerful medium in engaging our audience. So I'd like to show you an example.
Most valuable skill that I've learned is just being able to kind of adapt. I realize that through the work I've done, but also with interacting with other people. It's just, okay, we take what we have here, how can we improve it and implement it? So
being able to work with people from different teams within an organization, but also the complexities and challenges of change management.
Just go for it. If you have an idea in engineering, just prototype it, design it, and go for it. You don't have to worry about waiting for tens of people to approve it. If you have an idea, just make it, and we'll see where it goes from there.
This post got 1,008 interactions. Our previous posts got 168 interactions. That's 6 times the amount of our previous interactions. Additionally to our approval process and implementing videos, we wanted to make some smaller changes to spur engagement, as every detail matters. So firstly, we implemented location. Geotagging our posts and stories, this established a sense of place, especially physically here in Buffalo. Next, I wanted to incorporate people into our content. Our staff, our clients, our visitors are the heart of the JI, and I wanted that to come across in our content. Third, tagging. Tagging allows us to tag our clients, and they're able to reshare our content with their audience, growing our network. Hashtags. Hashtags are one of the best ways to broaden your reach, especially locally and globally. And lastly, emojis. It may seem trivial, but they're my favorite, and they're the best way to add personality and a little bit of emotion to your posts. As a result of efforts like acknowledging our clients and connecting with those who came in here, I was able to gain positive comments. I cannot overstate the immense power that these comments have. These are like 5-star reviews. They're not just words, it's a symbol of genuine connection. When followers leave positive comments, it reflects our impact and resonates our mission. I am thrilled to share the success that our initiative of improving our social media has had. In the month of July, we reached a 13.61 engagement rate. That is compared to our 1 to 5% industry average. This is a testimonial of the power of our mission and staying consistent on our social media platforms. Additionally, we gained 50 followers in just 30 days. This growth indicates the efforts to strengthen local presence is paying off. And if you want to help us start the month off strong, you can give us a follow. So now that we've discussed the importance of a strong social media presence and connection to the community, let me highlight how this effort has laid the foundation for an impactful endeavor. Our first annual education fundraiser. This gives our community an opportunity to engage and contribute to life-changing work here at the JI. Donations are what contribute to me being here and our fellow college interns being here. We're able to present and learn everything that they just all told you about. For our high school interns, we create equitable opportunities for those who aspire for a STEM career. But as you heard from Marielle, these students can face significant access barriers. Our programs are completely free as compared to other programs that are $60 to $3,000. Each dollar contributed to supporting our program directly affects these young lives. As Marielle showed you, these donations empowered them to explore their passions, gain real-world experience, and lay the foundation for future success. So, I want to leave you with a simple message. Small steps and action can make a significant difference. Just as I took small steps forward and our social media account, your support, whether it's through engaging, following, or donating to our cause, or spreading our message, has the power to enact positive change. You can contribute to our fundraiser by scanning this code. So if you take out your phone, use the camera app, and scan the QR code, it should take you to our fundraising page. It's also on the back of the pamphlets. And I just want us all to know that we should embrace the power of social media and collective action to amplify our message and create lasting change. Now, I'm going to invite my fellow interns back up for questions, and I thank you all for being here.
If anyone has any questions, I'll be coming around with the mic.
We just quickly wanted to say thank you so much to all of our mentors for your unwavering support throughout these last 8 weeks. We're really grateful for all of your feedback and oversight, and we can't thank you enough. So.
My question is, based on all of your super intelligence, are you able to get patents on these, or do you have intellectual property rights, or how does all that work? Because it seems like you guys are superstars and should be making some money on this.
Yeah. It's an engineer question.
Anybody? One of the engineers.
I guess that's up to our mentors.
Yeah, I don't think that the mentors feel that anything that they work on, well, incredibly valuable for us, is anything that is protectable, at least not up to this point, but who knows in the future. Maybe it's something that we'll have to investigate.
All right. I guess this question can go for anyone, but if your time here was extended, what would you want to work on next?
I can answer that because I already kind of said that, but I would continue working on my submissions through the FDA. As I explained, there's a long process, so I only got to work on a little bit. So I would continue working through that for the different devices I was working with.
I definitely want to work in the I2R lab, know what's happening back there. But it seems really interesting what's happening, so I'd probably do I2R.
I'd first figure out how the parking garage works a little bit more, but after that, the ISO framework for like lay people and reinterpreting that would be really cool.
Yeah, it's probably similar to most engineers. I want to keep design and iterations of my device and skull models, so yeah.
Mine's similar to Tyler, just to see your device and then see the problems that it has and just to see how much better you can improve it.
For me, the program managers exposed me to just so much new knowledge and new tools that were new to me, but that they've been using for so long that there were so many other directions that I could have taken my project. So definitely working with that other software and those tools.
Well, if it were up to me, I'd be downstairs performing procedures in the cath labs. But realistically, the goal for everything for the clinical immersion programs is to create flashcards to disperse to the medical device companies. So I would continue working on those.
I would like to continue learning under my mentor and just learning about grants and everything that she does. So, yeah.
Mine would probably be mobile brain boot camps. So a lot of our brain boot camps that I was talking about before, the students come here to the JI, so it would be really great for us to have like a little like bus or something for us to bring to them.
And the game of Jive.
And the game of Jive. So if you guys know the board game Life, Heather and I came up with one of the BME activities was to be a board game of the JI. So instead of you picking your career or going to college, you decide whether to make a small business and do your device on your own or take your device to the JI and have your process kind of accelerated. So.
All right, over here in the corner. If you guys remember and were listening well when we had our little meeting several weeks ago, you might know where I'm going to go with this question, or if you watched the video from last year. Out of curiosity, now that you're, say, 8 weeks through the internship, you knew what you wanted to do when you came here. Is there anyone that's like complete 180? You know what? I learned a lot because, as you know, I'm a big believer that any experience is good experience because you may learn what you don't want to do. Does anyone have anything that they learned that was very explicit? You know what? That's just not for me, and that's okay.
I'll go first. So working with the interns, I learned a lot more what the quality and regulatory staff does. And I am a person who likes to run around a lot when she's working. So I know that I definitely do not want to be sitting at my desk doing regulatory quality work. So I'm glad I wasn't one of those interns. But I mean, the work you guys did was amazing. But I mean, I don't want to do that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I don't want to be a doctor, and my family just thinks I should be a doctor, but I'm going for biomedical engineering, and that made me stronger in my desire to be an engineer. Although I do love what doctors do, it's just not for me, and I'm good with where I am.
I just can't sit at a desk, really, the whole day. Kind of need to have like more hands-on things to do. But when it comes to like writing like protocols and lab reports, I'll just no.
So
but it's part of engineering. It's an idea.
I really liked my work in the quality department, but the one thing I would change is working in the tundra that is in the back of the JI because it is freezing all the time. No, but seriously, I would really like to kind of work directly with patients, so I hope to pursue a career in the medical world, but it was really interesting to see the quality side of things as well.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything I don't want to do that I did the last 8 weeks. I really liked working with the model development team, and it'd be awesome to continue.
I also really liked everything that I did. Like James said, you can't sit at a desk all day, but I think this part of engineering has a nice aspect of being both in the lab and at your desk, which kind of like changes up the day, so it's really nice.
I am going to be quite a broken record here because, as I kind of said in my presentation, I absolutely love the fact that we working with the program managers meant doing something new every single day. which meant I was up on my feet and constantly moving around, which I love doing, and it really solidified that that's the type of work day that I want to have in the future. So it definitely taught me, again, that I probably won't want to sit down on.
Well, to be honest, when I first graduated high school, I was in between a school for physician assistant and biomedical engineering. But now that I've seen everything that the biomedical engineers do, I know I cannot do any of that. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that I necessarily disliked or I just know that I don't want to work at a desk because I would want to go into medical device sales. So, yeah.
Well, thank you guys all so much for coming, and we hope that you will join us for a reception across the hall at the Jacobs Institute, and we also have some snacks. So please join us over there, and I can also take you on a tour. So thank you again so much to our fabulous interns.
Cost like $1 million or anything?